In lesson 5.3, we're looking at fractions and to add and subtract those fractions. However, these fractions have unlike denominators. So our first example, and this example is using a model method. And so we have 1/3, and each one of these blocks right here is 1/3. And then we have these other blocks here that are 1/2. Now, when we look at the model method, it may not be your preferred one at one. You have to draw it out and be very precise with it. But we look at, the least common denominator between 3 and 2 would be 6. So we need to look at find a sixth fraction model with the same amount shaded. Well, between these two, we have a third that falls right here, and then 1/2. So between each of those, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are shaded, that they both share. So 1/3 plus 1/2 would be 5/6, because we are using the common denominator of 6. So let's take another look at a different method, and this is using a common denominator, and this is going to be our go-to, and this will probably be your easier approach. And so we have 1/3, and 1/3, knowing that our least common denominator is 6 between 3 and 2, I want to multiply my denominator by something to get to 6. So to do that, I need to multiply 3 by 2, and whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 2 is 2. Same idea with my second fraction, 1/2. I have to multiply 2 by 3 to get to 6, so I'm going to do the same to my numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. Now, having common denominators, I can just add 2 and 3, and I get 5/6. So let's take a chance for you to try it on your own, and we'll try here in a second. I'd recommend using the common denominator method, but do whatever makes sense to you. Alright, let's go ahead and try and checking our work here. So we have 3/5 plus 1/10. Now, between 5 and 10 as our denominators, I know that my least common denominator is going to be 10. So I'm going to convert 3/5 into a fraction that has a denominator of 10. So 3/5 to multiply 5 by 2, I can get 10. So whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. So 3 times 2 is 6. Now, since 1/10 is already with a 10th or a 10 in our denominator, I can just leave that. And I'm adding, so 6 plus 1 is 7, and 7/10 would be our final answer. So our second example, it's a story problem. Nadia uses 7/10 yard of blue material and 1/6 yard of white material to make a pillow. How much total material did Nadia use to make the pillow? So we are going to add 7/10 and 1/6. But to do so, we need to have a common denominator. So between 10 and 6, we could say, well, I can multiply 10 and 6 and get 60, but that's going to be dealing with some pretty large numbers in the end. Using our least common denominator between 10 and 6, the least common denominator is going to be 30. Because I can take 10 times 3 and get 30, and 6 times 5 and get 30. So whatever I do to my whatever I do to my denominator here in my 7/10, I have to do to my numerator. So since I multiplied by 3, I have to do the same thing. So 7 times 3 is 21. Now for my 1/6, I multiplied 6 times 5 to get 30, so I have to do the same to my numerator. 1 times 5 is 5. Since I have common denominators, now I can easily add these two fractions together. 21 plus 5 is 26. And we keep our denominator of 30. Now, when I have 26/30, that's not in simplest form, so I need to simplify or reduce. And I can factor out a 2 in each. So I'm going to factor out a 2. 26 divided by 2 is 13, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. because they each had a common factor of 2. So Nadia used 13/15 yard of material. And our third example, subtracting fractions. And so if Laura skates 1/4 mile more, she'll have skated 9/10 of a mile. How far has Laura skated so far? So we're going to be subtracting 1/4 from 9/10 to find out how far Laura has skated. So 9/10 and 1/4, the common denominator between 10 and 4, well, that's going to be 20, because I know that 10 times 2 is 20, and 4 times 5 is 20. I could have done 40, but again, we're dealing with larger numbers, and it's a lot easier to use our least common denominator. And in this example, 20 would be that. So 10 times 2 is 20, so I do the same to my numerator, 9 times 2, and I get 18. 4 times 5 is 20, so the same to our numerator, 1 times 5 is 5. And remember, we are subtracting. Don't add these. So 18 minus 5, we get 13. And we keep our denominator of 20. So she has skated 13/20 of a mile so far. Alright, now we're going to give you a chance to practice on your own. We'll check here in a second. Alright, checking number 2. You exercise for 1/2 hour on Monday and 1/3 of an hour on Tuesday. How long did you exercise on Monday and Tuesday? Well, this is very much similar to, it's the exact same kind of problem that we did for our very first example, but to work this out using common denominators instead of our model method, we can work that through. So we have 1/2 plus 1/3. Well, my common denominator between 2 and 3 is 6. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 3 to get 6. So I do that to my numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So I do the same to my numerator here. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I can add 3 and 2 and I get 5, and I keep my denominator as 6. So she has exercised 5/6 of an hour. Now we have our third quick check. You have 2/3 yard of felt, and you use 1/2 yard of the felt for a display. How much do you have left? So we're going to subtract. We have 2/3 minus 1/2. Common denominator between 3 and 2, we know that's going to be 6. And the least common denominator is 6. So 3 times 2 gave us 6, so we do that to our numerator, and we get 4. And 2 times 3 is 6, so we do that to our numerator, and we get 3. So 4 minus 3, we get 1/6 yard of felt that's left. That concludes lesson 5.3.